Well, I think guys all want to look a bit bigger. They want to look like a strong man. They want to fill out a t-shirt. That's typically the look. They're not really, when I speak to guys, they're not overly obsessed with being really ripped and really lean. Unless they're already lean, then that they feel like that's the next step for them. But a lot of guys just want to be a bit bigger. They want to go out and probably just get noticed. If they're single, they want to go out and get noticed. Hello and welcome back to the Fortified Coaching Podcast with me, Joe.
And me, Nina.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. What are we doing in today's podcast then? What are we covering?
Okay, so a couple of days ago, we filmed the podcast on Women's Day. Mm-hmm. And we touched a little bit on diet culture and its pressures on women to be very low body fat, skinny, but also sometimes a switch in diet culture also promotes being very, very muscular and very, very lean. And I guess we talked a lot about how that impacts women on an emotional level. And, it creates a lot of body negativity. And a lot of the time, people that work with us, they come to us with a lot of, they're very self-conscious. It's very aesthetic focused. They want to change themselves. And it's always based on hatred. And I do think on a media level, women get that a lot. It's still really, really difficult to read some stuff in magazines or on social media. When you see it, you just think, nothing's changed. We're still getting told to look a certain way, things like that. And I just kind of had the idea to speak a little bit about men today. And obviously, I think women are very vocal about that, about the impact on media and societal pressures on body image and what we should look like. And I thought I'd come at you with a perspective on men and the pressures that men feel.
Okay.
So, first of all, let's start off with your journey. Mm-hmm. So, when you started out weight training, how old were you?
It was 3 or 4 years ago.
Because you're only 22.
Yeah, that's your maths as well. How old was I? Well, I can't remember not weight training. So I can remember using my brother's dumbbells in the house when I was very young. I used to just do bicep curls. I used to do 100 on one arm, then 100 on the other, then 100 on the other. But strangely, I think I always started with my left arm because when I was younger, I still thought, well, I'm right-handed, so I'll do my left. That's going to make my left arm stronger. And I ended up doing more on one side than the other. So I got imbalances. Anyway, that's by the by. So yeah, always done some sort of training, weight training. Sporty, I'm of an age where we used to play out all the time. You weren't in the house. You'd be out playing games, kicking a football, playing cricket, whatever it was. Got into weight training when you could probably start going to the gym, being around 14 or 15. But we were just young lads messing around, doing a few things in kind of a backstreet gym, I guess. Then as I started getting older, started going to a local leisure centre gym. Again, just not really knowing what to do. You going in and you were just picking up bits of advice from the different people that you would meet in the gym, that you would talk to, or you just copy them. You'd see what other people were doing, you'd copy. But again, know what you know now to then you were just messing around really. You weren't really doing anything with any sort of purpose. Then, as I was playing football, you're reading magazines on how to get in shape. It was Men's Health at the time. There wasn't really the internet in the way it is today. There wasn't social media and Instagram in the way you can find things.
You are showing your age now.
So, So you're looking in Men's Health, you're finding things, you're following their diets, you're following their training, and you're kind of just going off that really. And I found that in terms of me and myself, when I did start to take things a little bit more serious with weight training, I ended up building a bit of muscle, was probably bigger than most of my friends, was still very fit, very sporty, was always the fittest on the football field, that sort of thing. But I also like to, as a young lad, being probably 18 to 25, used to like to go out a lot and drink a lot. So although I had a lot of muscle, I probably had a good bit of body fat as well. But as a younger lad, you couldn't really see it under a t-shirt. You just had that broadness, so it kind of hid it a lot. And then there was one point in my life when I decided, well, I want to see if I can do something. I joined a local boot camp, over the course of a period of months, lost a few stone, got lean, and then the journey kind of went from there, I guess.
Okay, so let's scan back to the magazines before the days of social media.
Yeah.
What images did you see, and did you feel any form of pressure to look a certain way based on these magazines and what men were looking up to, or do you not feel like you had the pressures that at that point?
I don't think there will be the same sort of pressure on men as women. Like, I don't know, men, you I don't know why it is, but you probably don't put that, as a man, you probably don't put that amount of pressure on yourself. I don't know whether it's just as a man you can hide things more easily. Like if you've got a bit of extra body fat, you can hide it in a t-shirt. You wear baggy t-shirts. Women, it's not really very flattering for a woman to wear baggy clothes all the time. Quite often they'll want to wear a nice, or they would prefer to wear something nice fitting. So there isn't that pressure of kind of going out and having to look a certain way with as you're a man, you know. There isn't that kind of culture amongst friends either, or your social groups. And quite often men have this kind of micro-aggressive nature with each other where they'll jokingly mock each other on their appearance anyway, and you've had that from being a young age. So if you're like someone who's a little bit overweight in a group and someone's taking the mick a little bit, it doesn't really get to you that much, not on a deep level in the way it might potentially with a woman. So there wasn't really that much pressure, I wouldn't say. I think most young lads will quite often want to look better because I think when you're young, you think there are certain things that come with being in good shape. You know, when you're young, you probably, you know, and you're trying to get girlfriends and talk to girls and things, there's the pressure of wanting to look good for that reason, things like that. But in terms of how people were in the magazines, Men's Health and things, it was quite it was a lean look, but it was it wasn't the ripped look that we have today.
I was just about to say, do you think it's got worse? Like, obviously, you're talking from a time in your perspective, which was like the early 2000s, probably. If I got that right.
Yeah, I left school in 2002.
Yeah, so early 2000s. And obviously, social media is huge now in comparison to back then. Well, we didn't even friggin' have it. So do you feel like the pressures on men have got worse? Because obviously your experiences are then. What about now? Do you think there's a difference?
I'd probably say it's maybe more heightened, more pressure, but I still don't think it's too bad. I think, you know, you have social media, but then you have programs like Love Island, for instance. So it's not so much social media and things, but we also have the culture. So, for instance, I don't watch Love Island.
No.
I hope I never have to. But, you know, you've got a bunch of attractive men and women. And what you'll find is you go in the workplace, for instance, and the girls in the office in the workplace will be talking about the guys and how good looking they are and how much they fancy them. So if you're a guy, if you're a lad, I guess you look at that and think, well, all of the girls in the office like that guy and he looks that way. Mm-hmm. They like that guy and he looks that way. So there is probably the pressure to try and conform and do something, but I still probably don't think it's as bad as kind of how women feel like they have to look good, and that shows with how we see people when we do consultations, or women when we do consultations and work with clients about how they see themselves and how much they beat themselves up. Like typically, if a guy gets on the scales and he's a little bit heavier, he's not that bothered about it.
I think a lot of it comes from childhood, you know. I mean, I blame the media a lot in how it used to literally rip women apart. Like you'd see pictures of celebrities on the beach that were in normal bodies, and they got absolutely slated for being slightly overweight. And I do think that is still with us to an extent. It's getting better. But I do think if you think about it from a childhood perspective, women are quite often praised for how they look as small children. Like you'll see a little girl in a little dress. It's like, oh, she's so pretty. Isn't she cute? And I think women's self-worth is developed from that point, that you get praised when you are pretty. And I think that continues into adulthood, potentially. Whereas boys, you don't really compliment them on how they look. You compliment more on their actions, what they're doing. And I think as a society, that's probably something that needs to change a little bit more. And I catch myself doing it myself when I'm around young kids, young girls. You'll naturally just compliment on how they look, but you don't realise what that eventually transcends to, and that's how they base their self-worth on, is being pretty.
Well, for men, I think that's one of the reasons why it's different for men, because when you're a man, you aren't necessarily judged on how you look as much as you are as a woman, and that carries on through life. Like when generalizing, and if this doesn't apply to you, or if you don't think this fits, then don't be too upset about it. But when you are a woman choosing a man, yes, you probably want someone who you're attracted to, but it isn't the be all and end all of things. Like women in for men look for someone who can support them, be there for them, be like a provider at times, and be solid, and be someone who can be reliable and support them and provide for them. Obviously they can do all these things themselves, but they look for that more in a man than a man would in a woman. So there is less pressure on a man for his appearance. I think they look for men for strength at times and being handy and being able to do certain things. So being aesthetically pleasing to the eye isn't necessarily like the be all and end all for a man.
Where do you think the pressures are there for you guys then, right now in this society?
Well, it's different because I work in an industry with a lot of personal trainers and a lot of young lads, and the pressure for them. So my world is those people who I see on a daily basis, and they probably feel like they have a lot of pressure to stay in shape. Whereas I think my social group of friends outside of that, there isn't that pressure. Now, don't get me wrong, there'll be loads of guys out there who do feel under pressure to be in shape for whatever reason, but I don't think it's the same level.
Do you think it's some expectations of women?
I mean, what, in the fact that they might want a partner or a guy to look a certain way?
I know you've just said it's less pressure.
I think less pressure. And I mean, there will be women who want to go with a guy who looks a certain way, but I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure, Nina.
So what was the answer to that question then?
What was the question again?
Where do you think pressures lie on men at the moment?
In terms of health and fitness?
Yeah.
Well, I think guys all want to look a bit bigger. They want to look like a strong man. They want to fill out a t-shirt. That's typically the look. They're not really, when I speak to guys, they're not overly obsessed with being really ripped and really lean. Unless they're already lean, then that they feel like that's the next step for them. But a lot of guys just want to be a bit bigger. They want to go out and probably just get noticed. If they're single, they want to go out and get noticed. And they do that by just being a little bit bigger, having broader shoulders, that sort of thing.
Well, do you think there's anything that men need to work on a mindset level? So obviously, where we talked on the women's episode, it was all about self-worth. It was all about, being respectful of your body on a mindset level, understanding what your body does for you on a daily basis to change the perception of self-worth from how you look to who you are, essentially, and what you can achieve, which again, I think goes back to the childhood thing that we have to really drill that into women from a young age. And sometimes we just don't do that. Is there anything that men need help on a mindset level, do you think?
Well, I think that men and women are probably slightly different in the fact that women seem to carry those things all the way through life, or certainly to a later point in life than men do. Men probably have issues with self-esteem and body confidence and how they look in their early manhood, in their 20s probably, and as they get older, that probably dies down quite a lot. But I think for younger lads who feel that pressure to get in shape and look a certain way and things, then it's more about and they probably do that because they want to impress girls because they're young lads, but it's more about confidence for them. Like they'll want to get in shape because they'll feel like it'll make them more confident. That's the missing ingredient for them. But confidence is the thing they need, not being in shape. Like there are plenty of good looking girls who will go for guys just because they're confident. If you look at the trend at the minute in Hollywood and things like that, you've got girls like Megan Fox and Kim Kardashian going with guys like Machine Gun Kelly and people like that who are skinny guys. Like they're not your stereotypical strong man with like your Harry Styles sort of guys. So what young boys perceive women to want, which is normally what they're doing it for, is not necessarily what they think they want.
Okay. So there's some similarities there in that, you can achieve these things by working on yourself first before you then go into a mass change of, I need to change my physique to be happy.
Yeah, and more. And if most guys you speak to, a lot of personal trainers as well, and bodybuilders and things, men will have started their journey because they were overweight, because they were unhappy, because they weren't getting any girls. That's why they got into it, to improve their chances.
So how would a guy improve his confidence without changing his body? Would it be the similar exercises we give our female clients in terms of respecting yourself a bit more, or?
I think it's valuing yourself a bit more. Men probably struggle with their identity a little bit and not really knowing who they are until a later age in life. So the gym, the gym can give you that for sure. And there's no reason why you can't do that alongside anything else you're working on. But
yeah, it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be both, but as long as you work on both, instead of thinking, if I change my physique, it'll fix everything.
yeah, exactly. But I think it's more, for young lads especially, it's more about finding out who you are really and having some values. Like when you're a young lad, you don't have many values. You don't have great morals and you don't have many values. But if you start to value things more, then I think your self-esteem and your confidence will build. And if you're working on your health and your body on top of that, then it's going to skyrocket for you.
It's difficult sometimes for people to pinpoint their values, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's quite a few exercises you can do. I like asking people who they admire, and then I ask them why they admire them, and it's always based on qualities of that person. And I always say, well, if you value that quality, if you like that quality of that person, it's probably because it's somewhere high on your values. So that's quite a good way to.
Yeah, and people, when you ask people what they value, it is a difficult question, but sometimes it can be like what you don't value, and that can give you what you value.
Yeah. Yeah. So like if you have a subject that you're really passionate about.
Like what you don't like about someone or yourself, and they're the things that you can value.
Yeah. If like something's brought up and a subject's brought up and it really, really angers you, and you can speak quite passionately about something, it's probably because whatever you are fighting for at that moment is of high value to you. So yeah, that's a good one to pick from.
What's next?
Well, I think I have to get back to the gym for a client, so we'll have to wrap up. Nice short one.
Okay, so podcasts coming up. Have we got any topics? Or are we going to leave it up to people to decide?
Yeah, we probably could do with some inspiration.
Some audience participation.
Audience.
I know, I said that really weird. It's 2 podcasts in a row. I've ended things really weird.
I'm sure you're like Canadian or something. Say scorecard.
Scorecard.
No, you're not doing it.
Right.
Scorecard.
Thank you for listening to that nonsense once again. If you do have any ideas, rather than listening to us waffle on, drop us a message or an email, and we will try and cover things in a future podcast.
Even
Thanks.
if it's just a question rather than a subject, like you can ask like just one single question.
Yeah,
about
ask some
something,
questions.
Yeah, that you're struggling with. Maybe it's in your journey. It can be mindset, physical, whatever. And we can maybe do a Q&A podcast next.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Thank you, guys. And as always, give us a like and a share if you've enjoyed today's podcast.
Thank you.